Hello and welcome to the Astrocast. What a while since we've done an episode for various reasons, but there was an announcement on Friday that we kind of need to talk about, so we're back. I'm joined tonight by
Mataspore.
And Theff.
Cool. So I'm going to finish off having my tea while we start off the discussion of Warhammer Fantasy Battles, or Warhammer the Old World as it's now being called. So Mataspore, would you like to start us off by kind of giving us a what was Old Fantasy?
What was old fantasy? Oh God. Okay. Yeah. I could do that. We've got time, right?
Just a small topic.
Okay. All right. Well, I mean, in the absolute simplest terms, lore fantasy was Age of Sigmar before the planet blew up. That's what old fantasy is, lore-wise. As for what it was, crunch-wise, rules-wise, well, I've got the rule book here. It's a chunky boy. It is a very, very chunky boy.
Damn, he thick.
Yeah. It's you do have a bit of weight loss, to be honest. Yeah. Rules-wise, there's a little teeny tiny bit of a clusterfuck. Mostly because it's the same basic rules that have just been added to for about, I think, 4 or 5 editions. It played very, very differently to 40k then and Age of Sigmar and 40k now. A very, very different beast. Units, formations, ranks, banners, musicians, magic, all that fun stuff. Combat worked completely differently. All the various combat maneuvers you could do. The way your unit was organized actually mattered. Oh God, I don't even remember exactly how war machines used to work. It's wonderful fun. Those artillery dice.
Did they work?
Sometimes.
So the way they used to work was you got your cannon, because I played, most of my experience comes from playing Empire. You get your cannon, you'd guess how far the range was, and then you'd roll 2 dice, which I had prepared. I'd only have one of those dice. I only have the scatter dice, which is only half the dice you need, because you needed 2 dice.
Need the artillery dice. Everyone loves the artillery dice.
So, what you would do is you would roll your scatter dice and your artillery dice, and the artillery dice had a 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12.
No, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 misfire.
That's it. Only the final one was misfire, but I couldn't remember how far up the 2s it went. And you'd add that to your guess range, and that's how far your cannon shot. Anything between those took a strength 10 hit, because it's a cannonball.
No.
Nope,
you got it wrong. I'm sorry. See, we've already gone wrong. You're forgetting it's the bounce with a cannon.
Doesn't it fire, then hits the ground, then it bounces?
That's right. But it just goes, if you overshoot the unit, the cannonball has sailed over their heads.
And this, dear listeners, is why Old Fantasy was so confusing.
Yeah. And then if you got a misfire, you had to roll a d6.
On the misfire chart. Everyone loves the misfire chart.
Gotta love the misfire chart. And it was, the bottom one was like, your cannon's clogged, you can't shoot this turn. The next one, bit more worse. It was like, you've seriously jammed your cannon, that's going to take 2 turns to clear. And the final one, I believe, was your cannon has exploded, remove the cannon and all the crew.
Well, almost. It was, although this might only be for certain cannons. The one below the top was your cannon has exploded, remove all the crew. The final one was the cannon immediately fires at maximum range and strength. Then remove cannon and all the crew. Although that may have been unique to Skaven.
I think that was just unique to Skaven.
That was unique to Skaven, yes. What happened was the cannon span like a top and then fired a full strength beam in a random direction, which was wonderful.
And this is kind of, as you see, Old Fantasy was very
wacky.
Again, one point I made earlier in the week was the magic, how magic worked. It felt a lot more like you're casting spells rather than. I've not really done spells in
Oh.
Age of Sigmar, but in 40k,
Because you were casting spells.
yeah. But psychic powers, they just kind of feel like a fancy gun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I've lost a mortal wound. Okay, cool. I'm a librarian. I'm Prominence librarian. I've got 4 more.
Yeah.
This touches on
No.
a brief thing that I've been saying for a while now. It's that both Age of Sigmar and modern 40k have lost the sense of humor that the older editions had. And this is a discussion for a complete other time, but I feel like we've kind of gone too far towards serious.
Yeah, I was about to say that the humor in Old Fantasy was restricted to orcs and Skaven, but then I remembered the Empire steam tank, so that's simply not true.
My skink priest turned himself into a frog on the miscast table.
I would like to remind you that the High Elves had intrigue at court as one of their rules, where when you started the game, you lined up 5 of your characters, rolled a dice, and whichever number between 1 and 5, that was your general.
Randomly chose the general. Yes, that was wonderful.
If it was 6, you got to choose.
Mhm.
But it could very well happen that your level 1 mage, you'd bought 1 or 2 dispel scrolls, just literally there to sit there and prevent some spells going off. He's now your general, not your 500-point lord on a dragon. And I think what they've kind of done with 40k and I suppose Age of Sigmar is they are more
streamlined
and a more competitive war game.
Yes.
They're trying to go for more balance, and so it can be played competitively in a tournament. Not that you couldn't play Old Fantasy competitively, but
oh, you definitely could. I did on many occasions. That's just some of my precious memories come from. Like the time my warp lightning cannon misfired and shot a full strength beam right across my entire battle line, and my entire army ran away.
Jesus.
That was wonderful. That was absolutely wonderful when that happened.
So here's the question for you: have you had a story of the same level of funniness happen in modern 40k, for example?
Nope.
I kinda. So this was an apocalypse game, admittedly in 7th, not 8th. But my knight got tanked by a lucky las cannon shot, which reduced it to 0 hull points. It proceeded to cause a chain reaction that took out a third of the board's worth of models, including knocking the last wound off a Warhammer Titan.
Excellent.
So Luca took out a lot more than her points worth, and in death she still served.
Nice. I'm just slipping next door because I can't remember to turn the oven off.
Oh.
Okay, that's kind of important. Okay, so while Brad makes sure he doesn't burn the house down.
So, well, yeah. I think that's the thing, though, is I can't think of many occasions.
I would point out, mate, that even in that, you kind of felt obliged to slap the words "in death she still served."
Yes.
On the end of the statement. That's not funny.
No, it's grimdark as all hell.
It's grimdark. Yes, stop it.
And I'm back.
He's back, hooray, and not on fire. All is well.
I'm not on fire. I had left the oven on.
Oh, no.
Excellent. Definitely not on fire now, then. Fantastic.
We're all good, though. So back to the conversation at hand. I think it's fair to say that Old Fantasy, for its many, many faults, is still quite loved as a setting.
Oh, yes.
I love the lore, and I got to admit, I love the game. I grew up pretty much playing the Old Fantasy rules, so I kind of had it. Every new edition was no big problem for me because it kind of just added a little more onto what I already had internalized. Coming from never experiencing it straight into 8th is a bit of there's a lot to swallow.
I'll elaborate on that later.
But yeah, if you know what you're doing and you're playing someone else who knows what they're doing, you can have a really, really fun game because everybody understands how magic works, and everyone knows what panic is, and everyone knows what units cause fear and terror, and what units are flammable, and what units are ethereal, and what units have flaming attacks, and what units regenerate, and who's using whose leadership, and what those number of ranks mean, and who should be charging who, and how far most units can move. and who you should be challenging, and what a banner means when they have it in the goddamn.
I mean, so this week I found the mother load of old rule books on a PDF archive, and just going through some of the stuff and going, oh, this is why I liked fantasy. Like stuff with like the General's Compendium, which was a bit like, I suppose, the modern chapter approved. But the first line was like, none of these rules are official and should not be considered, a core part of the rule set. But there was stuff for campaigns, like really in-depth rules for sieges, Warhammer Ahoy, which is the rule set I've always wanted to play with.
Pirates,
like, take your 28mm models and put them on a boat of the right scale. So you can see the main, stumbling block of Warhammer Ahoy is you need to build a boat out of foam board and plasticard, which at some point is a project I desperately want to do.
I think if we ever get into live streaming, we should get a game going and stream it.
September 7th.
Or
both at this point.
I will happily relearn all the rules and throw down with someone in Old Fantasy. Very happily.
I know me and Callum are planning to play some Sixth at some point, because that's the kind of edition we both started in and both have got the most nostalgia for.
I'm just going to warn you now, you probably don't want me to dig out the 6th edition Skaven Codex. There are things in there. There are things in there that you would not enjoy. Such as me being the only one with the ability to fire directly into combat.
Oh, God, I remembered that.
Yep, Skaven can do it, but nobody else can. Because Skaven just don't care.
And 0 fucks were given by the little rat men that day.
Yeah, then they changed it. I think, they changed it to you can only do that with Skaven slaves now. Well, in the most recent Old Fantasy edition. But in 6th, oh, no. Any unit. The Chaos Chosen Knights of Khorne have just charged your, they've broken through your lines and charged your Warp Lightning Cannon. That's cool. That's fine. Because I have another Warp Lightning Cannon aimed squarely at that Warp Lightning Cannon.
But then, isn't that part of the theme of the Skaven? Is they're all conniving backstabbers.
The rule I think was called "Life is cheap."
Wow.
And because Skaven were so cheap points wise, that the hits were always allocated 50-50. I think 1 to 3 they hit a Skaven, 4 to 6 they hit the enemy, or the other way around. But considering how low points value the Skaven were, you normally won the exchange.
Fair.
Yeah, sheer number of bodies.
Yeah. With the downside that they also had a rule, I think, called Scent of Fear, which meant the moment one unit ran, other units had to test to see if they ran. And that could start a chain reaction that caused your whole army to run.
That's fantastic, and it's just reminded me of the orc animosity rule.
Oh yes, roll at the very start of a turn to see if you fight each other.
Yeah,
because they might punch each other. They might punch each other to death, or your entire army may get a free move towards the enemy line, which is cool. All depends on what you roll.
So, as you can tell, we're quite fans of Old Fantasy from this. So when the announcement came up last Friday as of time recording that Games Workshop were planning to do something with it, it's probably a good time to say at this point, we don't know what they're going to do. They basically
whatever they're going to do, it's not for years.
So people shouldn't get overly hyped and excited and spend money on eBay buying models. I've only spent about 20 quid, it's fine.
Right, I still have all my old Skaven.
Well, my Empire army was just a bit broken because it had been put in a box of stuff I didn't really care about, and there were some bits missing. I was like, I should actually probably buy a proper wizard. Yeah, so bits like that. So it's just like, we'll come back onto this maybe a bit later, but getting back into fantasy in a little way, but not going all in at the moment. So, as you know, we really all enjoyed Old Fantasy. Why did it die if it was such a good game?
Oh, I could tell you why, lore-wise as well, and I can give a huge middle finger to 40k at the same time. They advanced the fucking story, is why it died.
That gasp you hear from around the world is all of the neckbeards realizing that Games Workshop do in fact advance the story occasionally. So, what happened?
The planet blew up. I said this
So-
in the previous discussion when I went on the rant about why Age of Sigmar is better. But yeah, the very long story short, Chaos won, planet boom. Then Sigmar got a new dragon friend, and made some new places in the Winds of Magic, because you can do that. And then stuff happened, and more stuff happened, and schoolyard drama split everyone up, and now they're fighting again. And it's wonderful fun.
Yeah. So, from a real world perspective, 8th edition fantasy was, put nicely, a wonderful collection of eclectic rules and fun. From a new player's perspective, it was a clusterfuck. It was one of the least accessible rule sets I've ever played, and I'm talking as someone who enjoyed playing it. Like, I played Lizardmen in 8th edition, and I didn't come in
Yeah.
until 8th edition. And thankfully, I have Mataspore to teach me the rule set, or else...
But to be fair, I don't think I so much taught you the rule set as I said, you see the dead guy.
Oh, yes.
Play him. He summons meteorites. That's all you're going to need him to do. You'll be
For
fine.
those who don't know, Lord Croak was a special character in the Lizardmen who was basically a dead frog that knew one magic spell that could never be swapped, replaced, or anything else, and summoned X number of angry meteorites to rain down on the enemy. And the enemy went away.
Yep.
Now that made playing fantasy for a new player significantly easier, but I can understand how, me in my mid-20s, I had been playing 40k for 15 odd years at that point. I understood war games fairly well.
Yeah, I do also remember like trying to explain to you, basically, just you've got your 20 strong unit of Saurus warriors, and I've got my 50 strong unit of Skaven, and we're going to smash them into each other now. And now let me explain all the modifiers that happen before anyone gets to hit anything.
Yeah.
Oh, and by the way, only your front rank can fight, but my front 3 ranks can fight because I'm a horde and I have spears.
Yeah. See, for your average 12-year-old walking into Games Workshop, that was not an accessible thing.
No. And I think the other problem was the model count kept creeping. Games Workshop has a problem with this. Each edition, everything gets a little bit cheaper, so you can have slightly more into your army.
Points-wise, we should stress.
Points-wise, obviously not cash-wise.
Yep.
And suddenly, instead of being... So I've alluded, I'm currently working on 1,000 points of 6th edition fantasy. And in that I have 3 heroes, about 45 troops and a cannon, which is, not exactly a huge task to build.
Yeah.
Well, repaint, because they're all painted, but shockingly so, because I did them when I was about 12. In Modern 8th, I don't know, that's probably just over 500 points more than... I'd have to check it, but the scale creep was a massive problem in terms of points.
Oh, definitely.
It was, and it led to a situation where it was really hard to balance an army.
Well, there were. If you go back in if you go back in 6th, it was not hard in certain army books to find models that cost over 1,000 points by themselves.
I remember Lord Croak in 8th was 400 points, and I remember thinking that's incredibly expensive for a hero.
No, it's
And
not.
then I looked at the cost of some of the others for other armies, and it was just like, oh, okay.
For what Lord Croak can do, that's not expensive at all.
So actually, that's probably a good character to have as a comparison. So give me a second. Rules, army books. I do have Lizardmen on here. There we go. Let's just see how much Croak cost in 6th. Holy moly! Right, how much do you reckon Lord Croak cost in 6th?
I would have called it 1,000 points.
Price is right. Price is right rules.
1,300.
Theff is right, but you weren't far wrong, Mataspore. He was 1,225 points.
Oh, so I was closer. Yay!
Price is right rules. Closest without going.
He said 1,000.
Closest without going over.
Oh, fuck that. Okay.
But a great example of points creep.
So yeah, that's ridiculous in terms of, and I believe he probably also took up a hero slot as well.
Oh yeah, he took up a Lord slot. Lord.
He took up. So I
Lord,
knew he took.
not hero.
I knew he took up a Lord, but several special characters didn't just.
Oh
take
yeah,
up a
Lord and hero slot. Yes, you're right.
He takes up a Lord, a hero, and a rare. Army composition also worked quite differently.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because it was, instead of a standard force org chart, you had percentages of your army had to be X amount. So I think it was 25% had to be troops, if I remember correctly.
At least, yeah.
And then you broke up the rest accordingly.
Yep.
It's 25 characters, 25 rare, and 25 the other one.
50 for special.
50 special, that's it. Special was the kind of stuff, not really rare, but too good to be troops.
Yeah. Empire great swords, your war machines, that kind of stuff. Those are kind of the reasons why Old Fantasy eventually died in 2015. There's other kind of more tinfoil hatty theories, such as Games Workshop lost the big lawsuit with Chapter House miniatures around 2014, 2015. And it meant that a lot of their stuff was no longer IP protected. Yeah. And one of the criticisms was levelled at the old world is it was, at a broad level, quite generic fantasy.
I think it would be fair to say that generic fantasy covers Tolkien fantasy.
Yeah.
Which, there are obvious inspirations, if we put it charitably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's not fair to say. That is probably also fed into the reason. It's also around this time that a lot of 40k, such as the Imperial Guard, are no longer the Imperial Guard, they're the Astra Militarum. Because you can't copyright Imperial Guard, you can Astra Militarum. So that probably all fed into it, and then we got the Age of Sigmar.
But that's the boring outside world reasons for it. Don't like them.
They're somewhat depressing because it's capitalism.
I'm sorry if I go slightly quiet. I've just opened the lovely 6th edition Skaven Codex and I'm reminding myself of the glory.
Yeah. Nice.
What do we want to see from new Old World? Because for me personally, I'd love to see the grand strategy and the sense of fun and ridiculousness back.
Yeah.
But I want it to be accessible.
Yes.
And I think I might be asking for my unicorn cake and eating it, but
yeah, I got to admit, I'm kind of torn because don't get me wrong, and you heard the massive list of things I went through before that you had to know about really to make a game work. But the thing is, that was almost for dedicated players, people who actually enjoyed it. That was very much part of the charm. Like it mattered. It was a kind of game where the side of the enemy unit you charged would have a massive impact on how the combat worked.
And I think the whole rank and flank it's so much the core of fantasy, you couldn't get rid of that.
no.
What I'm hoping, so that the couple of things that have given me a little bit of hope at the moment for this, they've compared it to Horus Heresy.
Yeah.
Now, Horus Heresy is not primarily a competitive game. It's primarily a narrative game. So they're not so worried about balance and that kind of thing. It's more about telling a story with your toy soldiers. Which I think the fantasy setting would be ideal for.
Definitely.
Because then you can have the crazy, wacky rules and stuff like that. And you don't need to worry so much about balance. Now, the counterpoint to that is armies still need to be playable and fun and somewhat competitive, which that I kind of feel I'm asking for unicorn cake and eating it.
Well, again, I don't know that they do have to. Right, the Skaven army that I used to play in fantasy, it was very, very much a 50-50 beast. Either I would absolutely steamroll someone, or a key unit would break and my entire army would vanish off the board. That happened more often than I'd like, but it was always funny when it did.
And I think you've hit it on the head there. For a narrative game, fun is what matters over and above everything else. And I think that that's what they're really going to have to get down, is making any game you play of the old world, as it's currently called, And that sounds weird for a game, but I think that it's very easy to design a perfectly functional rule set that is boring as all hell to play.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
I've played war games that fall into that trap. There have been certain editions of games I've loved that have been.
Ah, there it is. I found it. Sorry, I'm reading through the thing again. I found my favorite artifact. It's only my favorite because of lore. It's the Fell Blade. Everyone loves the Fell Blade.
That fucking thing.
It's the blade the Skaven made to kill Nagash, and it almost works. It's fucking amazing. It's also horrible. It kills the wielder really quickly, but you don't care.
Well, sacrificial rat and all that.
Yeah,
But-
about that.
I'm just going to say 5th edition 40k falls into that trap of being competent, but not necessarily fun. I look forward to the blowback on that.
Here we go. Clan Rat Slaves. Points per model. 2.
Jesus.
I mean, at least that is for a horde army. So it's
Yeah.
kind of like, you know what you're getting in for.
Well, I mean, like, Clan Rats, your basic actual troops are 5 points per model. And you probably want to give them spears, so that's 6 points per model. But Clan Rat Slaves are brilliant, because they're 2 points per model. You give them no upgrades whatsoever, because they have the expendable special rule. Which means, if they're destroyed or run away, other Skaven don't suffer panic tests.
Nice.
It's amazing.
Jesus. See, that's another thing that was big in the older editions of Fantasy, was that you had to actually buy upgrades for units. It wasn't a case of, oh, we just give you all the stats on a card and they are armed with a mixture of these things. It's a case of, this one specifically has a shield, this one has a sword, this one has a spear, and this one has drums.
Yep. Although the one with drums does count as armed with does count as being armed the same as everyone else in the unit, because apparently they're just that good.
Yeah. It just has a spear up his arse and charges
go.
backwards.
Found a Fang Column Bone Ripper, 560 points for a free wound model. Who you can put on a Screaming Bell for 200 more points, so that's 760 points.
Oh, those
Meaning
numbers are crazy.
you couldn't actually take him in a game that was smaller than oh god, it would have to be over, well, it's 25%, remember, so it would have to be over 3,000
Yeah.
if he was riding a Screaming
Jeez.
Bell. Yeah.
In some ways, I feel that's why the percentage rules that came in was that an 8th thing or was that a 7th thing?
I think that was 7th or 8th. Yeah, it's. I don't think it's in 6th.
Because it's 6th is you have to take 2 core. You may take up to 3 special, 1 rare,
That's the
and
one.
3 heroes below 2,000 points.
Yeah, that's it. And above it, you can start taking lords and stuff like that. Ugh. That's
Which-
from a while ago.
It's the rules that I've been looking at recently, so it's all fresh in my head. So what I'm hoping for with the old world is they take the essence of old fantasy. They take the rank and flag, they take all that, but they don't feel hidebound to the previous rules.
Yeah. I would say I'd like it to be, you know, that Dread movie they made a few years ago,
Yeah?
where it
Yeah.
was completely didn't look anything like the comics, but it captured the spirit of them perfectly.
Yeah.
That's what
Yes.
I want here. I want them to make the Dread movie of fantasy.
That's a good analogy. It's a bit of a weird analogy, but I quite like that.
No, I like it. I
Um,
like it. Yes.
So we've kind of discussed what our hopes are. Now, this has had mixed reactions from the community. The amount of salt in the AOS subreddit was a little bit ridiculous when I was reading through.
Really?
Yeah, there's some butthurt people out there.
Why? They're not getting rid of AOS. They're just bringing.
There's a whole lot of stuff. There's like the some people are saying that it will take away from AOS development time. There's a lot of I've just rebased my army. I don't want to rebase my army.
Yes. Back on squares for you.
See, if Games Workshop handle this cleverly, which I hope they
won't,
will.
but okay.
Yeah, fair enough. If the Sisters Battle Boxes launch is anything to go by, yeah. Okay. What I'd like them to do is cater for people who have rebased their armies by doing the very simple thing of movement trays. Like, that's been a thing in the past.
I
War of
made
the
my
Ring.
own out of cereal boxes.
Yeah. I've still got all the ones I made for my lizard men, but it wouldn't be hard to do apocalypse-style movement trays for...
They've done it before. The War of the Ring, one of the Lord of the Rings spin-offs, was designed for massed battle, and that was to use the round bases Lord of the Rings came on to do a square formation. Now, I don't have as much nostalgia for square bases. I kind of think stuff looks better on round. I know that's heresy in fantasy circles, but so I've got a square and a round one in front of me, and that's it. I've got a 20mm square and a 28mm round.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I've got an Empire Bright Wizard, and he just seems to fit better on the round. I mean, it is a bigger base, but he doesn't look. I have a problem with models where the feet go over the edge a little bit.
Round bases look better. I'm not gonna lie. Round bases look so much better.
So I would not be opposed to them doing round bases, but with a square movement tray. I think
Yeah.
that would be the way to go, because then you can. And then if they release rules for porting your fantasy army into Age of Sigmar,
Well, they actually kind of have recently. Going slightly off topic, the Cities of Sigmar book dropped a couple of weeks back, which basically gave you rules for using all those lovely old miniatures that you have tucked away somewhere, like dwarf gyrocopters and all that, Dwarden gyrocopters and all that stuff, in games of Age of Sigmar. Now, I'm wondering if that's a strategic move to get people to remember all these really awesome old miniatures and bring them out of hiding right in time for a couple of years' time when they drop the old world.
it could very well be. I mean, so one thing that I've watched a lot of commentators' discussions on Age of Sigmar the last couple of days, and there was one that he's a bit of a Marmite character, but if you ever watch The Outer Circle, he's very pessimistic, which is not necessarily a bad thing with Games Workshop, considering he's primarily a heresy player.
Okay.
They've not been brilliantly treated the last few years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But one point he has consistently brought up, which I do think is very valid, is Games Workshop has a lot of systems at the moment.
Yes.
And they're not all very well supported. I mean, look at Aeronautical Imperium. Aeronautical Imperialis, sorry, which dropped quite recently. And so far, you have a Thunderbolt, another kind of Thunderbolt, a Marauder, another kind of Marauder, a Dakar Jet, a fighter bomber, and a big bomber.
And yet, on the flip side of that, you look at the amount of stuff that's dropped for Warcry in the space of 5 months, and it's mind-boggling. Like, that system has almost they've almost spaffed their load too quickly for Warcry.
They're not consistent with their release stuff, with their release schedule at times. It's like when Necromunda first dropped. And the Escher and Goliath gangs were really cool. But that was it for a good couple of months before Orlok dropped.
Yeah.
And it's the drip feed. I almost feel like with Necromunda, they should have dropped the 6 house gangs at the start.
Yeah. Or at least 4 of them.
At least 4 of them. So I think that's a fair complaint that's saying, well, how do we know that there's going to be support for armies at launch? Are we just going to get Empire and Orcs and then have to wait 6 months for chaos?
Given that the miniatures are... Okay, so the grand fallacy of Age of Sigmar is that everything has changed. In reality, a lot of the units are exactly the same as they always were. They've just been put in shiny new boxes.
I was going to say, GoTrek would like to have some words with you about that.
Can I bring some stats into this?
Yeah.
So when I was watching the Outer Circle video and he was saying, oh, well, they're not going to get support, there's not going to be models. And I was like, I know there's a lot of old fantasy models hidden throughout the Age of Sigmar range.
Mm-hmm.
And my kind of personal thought is when they relaunch Age of Sigmar, not Age of Fantasy Battles, what they need to do is they need to release a Ravening Hordes book, which I believe has been done a few times, which is their equivalent of an index from 8th edition 40k. Just basic, get your model on the table rules. There's no fluff. There might be a couple of magic items, maybe one army special rule, just to get your models on the table.
Yeah.
I think that definitely needs to be there. That really should be in the main rulebook almost.
Yes.
Similar to the 3rd edition 40k rulebook, which had all of the armies in the back.
It did. I still have it on my shelf.
Now, alongside that,
I would just point out, 8th edition fantasy, they have that in the main rulebook.
oh, brilliant.
The basic stats for everything and the basic magic items. And all the
Awesome.
spells. Well, all the 8 basic spells anyway. They're all
Alongside that, I would like them to seek to drop 4 armies with proper army book support.
Yeah.
And I think that would be, if that came out as the initial, this is the old world, I think people would be happy with this. So I kind of had my idea of what those 4 factions should be, and I wanted to see what their model range was like. So I did a census. So the 4 I took was to kind of follow the Age of Sigmar, Order, Chaos, Death, Destruction, Grand Alliance. Choose one from each.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we've got the Empire, we've got Warriors of Chaos, Vampire Counts, and Orcs and Goblins. I thought that was a good spread of fantasy armies that if those dropped to start with, people would be okay with.
Yeah.
There is other stuff like obviously Skaven. Everyone would want their faction to become, but I thought if those 4 dropped first, that's not a massive problem. And it kind of shows willing from Games Workshop, but they are going to support this. Look, they've started with 4 armies. So I then took the 8th edition rule books, army books, and I made a list of all the models, all the units that are in them, and then compared that to what is currently available on the Games Workshop website, UK Games Workshop website. So the Empire had 38 units in 8th. 17 of those are still available from the Games Workshop website.
That's not terrible.
The majority of the ones that aren't available are characters.
Yeah.
Which makes sense. And there's a few things that were definitely showing their age. So the militia kit and the knightly orders, militia maybe not so much, but the knightly orders, when you compare them to the new characters on horses, there was quite a difference. I've got both models of the old knightly order and the general of the Empire kit. And I'll compare the 2, showing you. So they did really stand out.
Yeah, if you want to compare old to new models, I can think of no better example than dragons.
Yes.
Look at a dragon from 8th and look at a dragon from 6th.
Yeah.
And
so then what I did for those 4 factions, I also looked at what was the previous version they released of that model, and would it still be passable in the modern age? So of the 19... Okay, so in the Empire, I had 3 categories. I had yes, no, and suitable. So suitable is... There is currently only one General of the Empire model, or general model in the equivalent of Empire.
Yeah.
You can't really mount him and put him on a horse. You can only give him a great weapon. So that's what I'm saying. He's suitable, but he's not covering all your options. So knocking off Captain and General, because they're basically the same thing, just more powerful. There are 13 models that remain that I think would be perfectly fine. They could just bring back in and cause no problems. So really, for Empire, they need to release a Knights kit. That's Knights and maybe Militia.
Yeah.
We then move across to Chaos Warriors. They had 37 in 8th. And I would argue that 30 of those are still would pass muster.
That's impressive.
And again, the majority of the ones that are missing are characters and stuff like Chaos Trolls and Chaos Ogres, which were really old models when Fantasy ended.
Yeah.
The most impressive, though, is Vampire Counts. So Vampire Counts had 34 units at the end of 8th. All of those models are still available.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to play 8th edition Vampire Counts, you can go and buy them from the Games Workshop website. Now, some of those are showing their age. The zombie kit and the bats kits are looking a
little bit
on the old side, but they would do. And finally, there's Orcs, which is in a bit of a weird place. So they had 51 units in 8. today,
Yeah.
of which 25 are still on the Games Workshop website. So they kind of break down into two. Yes, so what you see, so what's missing is the generic orcs and goblins.
Yeah.
So orcs were broken into orcs, black orcs, and savage orcs.
Yep.
There are black, well, I don't know what they're called now, but they're essentially black orcs on the site, and there's savage orcs on the site. It's the generic that have gone. Same with the goblins. Night goblins are all there,
That's because everyone loves the night goblin.
and they're unique.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, they really are.
And
There's
That's
something
a
special.
kind thing to say about them.
and the forest goblins, the kind of generic goblins, because I think both of the basic boys kit and the basic goblin kit was also showing its age. So I don't think there will be a lot of work to get those factions. I mean, I'd argue for Empire, Chaos, and Vampire counts, maybe one unit each and re-release the characters. There you go, sorted. Goblins, orcs and goblins, potentially you might need to do some more work in, but I don't think model support is going to be the problem. Now you kind of expand that out a bit more and just broadly look through the range. Beastmen all seem to be pretty much there. Chaos demons are pretty much there. Dark elves are very well represented in the new range.
Yes, they are.
Not surprising, considering the role they play.
Wood elves are, a bit split up, and they are missing some bits, but they're there. Lizard men seem to all be there. So really, the only of the old races, like core races that are missing stuff, are high elves and dwarfs, which have been pretty gutted. Dwarves less so than high elves, and the Bretonnians and the Tomb Kings, who have been completely squatted.
See, that brings me to a thing that would really gain them some love, is if they were to re-release the Tomb Kings and Bretonnians with this. If they were to do a starter box with those two armies in.
Yeah, that would show serious willing.
Oh, if they did that, I would. I don't play either of those armies. I would buy that.
Yeah,
just
but
to
I'd be all over that box just to have the models.
because Tomb Kings and Bretonnians are freaking awesome.
Yeah.
They are, like, gameplay wise, they're both pretty unique and awesome. Bretonnia is pretty much the only pure cavalry army in the game, and Tomb Kings were undead that weren't vampire counts, like really weren't vampire counts. They operated completely differently.
Yeah.
And it was wonderful.
They weren't just mindless zombies, they were actually interesting.
Yeah.
And Egyptian themed, which, as we know, makes everything
Yeah,
awesome.
that too. Yes, they did look very pretty.
I don't think model support is going to be a problem.
No.
I think my biggest concern, people need to support the game. If people genuinely want old fantasy to come back, because that was the other problem in fantasy, just people weren't buying stuff.
Yeah.
And Games Workshop is primarily a model company.
Yeah, that's the problem, because the reason people weren't buying stuff is because everyone who was playing it already had a massive collection.
Yeah, I'm not saying Games Workshop weren't at fault for the reasons behind why people weren't buying stuff, but
that's the absolute focus point, kernel, pivot, whatever you want to call it. They have to make it easily accessible.
Yeah,
I don't know how they're going to do that, but if they want it to work, it has to be easily accessible.
Yeah, completely on that one. I think we've kind of covered the most important points about the fantasy release, or the announcement of fantasy.
Yeah. I don't really think of much else to say. I can rant about my favourite units in fantasy for a bit, but perfectly honest, you don't really need me to do that.
That's fair. So I'll just so what I've taken to doing since we've launched fantasy, well, not fantasy, but it's coming back. I've decided I will play a few games of fantasy at some point in the near future.
Yay!
I've spent the last week sorting out my empire. I will now have 1,000 points of empire sorted. I also have some dwarfs and high elves, but they need more work to get playable. So my kind of current plan is to get about 1,000 points of empire playable, and then leave it at that until we know more.
That's fair. I've got about that in lizard men lying around. So
I have significantly more than that in Skate. Um, I will. Well, I much prefer 8th over 6th,
Yeah.
mostly because there's a lot more toys in the army book.
Yeah.
But I will quite happily play a 1,000 or larger point game of 8th against anyone you like. And to be perfectly honest, odds are good that in the very first turn, my Warp Lightning cannons are going to start spinning randomly and then blow up my army. But
And that genuinely sounds like quite a lot of fun. So yeah, we will have to get that sorted.
awesome.
I think we do a day at Dark Sphere at some point, and we will get this playing and
Yes.
take photos and do some battle reports.
Yes, that would be quite cool. Of kind of, there we go.
That would be good.
I should be able to get my Empire.
If you want to, you can flex your writing chops and write the battle report from the view of your general.
Ooh.
That's good fun.
Which I haven't got to write as a Skaven for a long time. It's
Ooh, I
brilliant
like
fun. Everything is someone else's fault.
Nice. I like it. So that's fantasy kind of put aside for one moment. It's no longer in the box in the attic. It's now, on the shelf.
It's in your project drawer, ready to be looked at again at some point soon.
Yeah. There's been a couple of other big things from Games Workshop. Theff, would you like to talk sisters?
I would. So, a little bit of background here. I picked up a copy of Codex Witch Hunters back in the early 2000s in Games Workshop Frank Cross.
The grand times. Before the world went to hell.
Yeah, before the dark times, before the Empire.
I have. It's one of the codexes I did bring down with me when I last went to York. I didn't pick up my fantasy stuff because I'm not going to need my fantasy stuff. It's never going to come back. I do have, however, my 3rd edition Witch Hunters in my hand.
Yeah, they were the 3rd army I picked up for 40k. And this was back when I was a teenager with very little regard for responsibilities of life or anything else. So I bought my basic 2 boxes of sisters because the minimum squad size was 10. I bought an Inquisitor and proceeded to cut his sword off and give him an Inferno pistol because that was just cooler, so he was dual wielding. And a Penitent engine and a couple of other bits. I fell in love with the aesthetic of this army. It was so much fun. And yes, it was scrubbed here in the meta at that point. It was not usefully playable unless you bunched in a load of Guard or inducted Space Marines or allies in general. But it not only gave us the Sisters of Battle, who just look awesome, and the models, even from 2nd edition, still hold up to this day. I have a bunch of the original metal sisters I bought in my glass cabinet at home, next to St. Celestine from Gathering Storm, and they look easily as good as she does, my paint job notwithstanding. What made this army fun, though, was that it was the first time we properly saw the different flavors of the Inquisition out on the battlefield. Like, these were the Witch Hunters, the Ordo Hereticus. These were the creepy guys that kind of policed everyone, including the other branches of the Inquisition. And they were scary. They were up for burning people at the stake, and they had the best orbital strike of any army in the game because it targeted a single terrain feature, which you wrote down before the game, and then revealed when you were going to launch it, and then scattered from that terrain feature. What you did was you targeted a river or a road that ran across the whole map. You then chose which point from that.
Yeah, you could say what point of the terrain feature it fucking targeted on.
Yes. Oh. So you're playing on a 6x4 board. There's a road that runs the length of the board. Oh, look, there's your enemy's deployment zone. I'm going to scatter from that end of the road. It was cheesy as all hell. So fast forward the better part of 15, 16 years, and the Games Workshop big survey happens, the big community survey. And overwhelmingly, the response was, give us fucking plastic sisters. Games Workshop kind of went, well, we gave you Celestine, and then we shouted, no, fucking give us plastic sisters. They went, okay, message received. And so about a month ago, they revealed some of the models for this new Plastic Sisters release. And we're all sat there going, oh, these are really pretty. This might actually be good. And then they showed us the whole content of the box. And it's the special edition codex, it's the special edition cards, it's dice, it's decals, it's a new penitent engine, it's multi-pose Plastic Sisters. And yeah, I saw this box and I turned to my wife and said, this is amazing. And she said, yes, it is. And then it came to launch day, and god damn it, Games Workshop, you are terrible at this shit.
There's a lot of problems with how they launched, I think is fair to say. The fact that they also put out the next book in the Siege of Terror series, the special edition that when they released the first one crashed the website and had a load of problems with scalping, decided to do the two big popular releases on the same day.
Yeah.
Maybe not the best move they ever made.
Fantastic. And problems with the launch aside, fuck everyone, I got my box. In the nicest possible way, I was very lucky in that my wife took heed of me pointing out the pretty and went, he likes sisters. They go well with my Space Wolves when we ally. Let's get it for him. So I'm very, very lucky there, and thank you, Amy, if you're listening. So, box will arrive. I will do photos with the unboxing, and hell, I may even do a video with the GoPro on my head because I am excited about this. It proves that Games Workshop do listen to their fans occasionally.
Well, I'm not sure about that. I think it more proves that if you scream loudly enough, someone's eventually going to hear you.
I think it also helps that. So I was talking to the manager in my local store when they first announced Sisters, and I was like, "Oh, this looks really cool." And he seemed to be making the comment that part of the reason is the success of the Sisters of Silence they released with Prospero. They were one of the best-selling models in the range, and that also helped make Games Workshop go, because I think there was probably a concern in Games Workshop that there was a view within the community that girls are icky. I'm not buying girly girls. As ridiculous as that is, they sound to some. I think that probably was, and maybe not completely unjustified.
Yeah, I mean, representation in 40k is something that we should touch on with maybe others than three young to middle-aged white guys talking about it.
No, it's fine. I play Drukari. We've got that representation done. Half the Cavalite warriors are female. It's not a problem. In fact, some of them are probably more than one gender. It doesn't matter.
There aren't enough female models in 40k. I'm just going to throw that out there. The sisters.
Right. You say that in a different tone of voice, it comes over as very creepy, but I know what you mean.
Yeah.
It's all fine.
The sisters were one of the few armies that were a non-sexualized, non lots of skin on show, which I know falls under the sexualization thing, but you know what I mean.
It's very hard to sexualize power armor. Not impossible, but very hard.
I mean, they've even put breasts on the power armor, and it's not that sexualized. I think the other thing with the sisters is it's a power fantasy. They're a very powerful, especially in the lore. You know, they're not exactly pushovers. So that's it gives women the same thing. That's probably badly worded, but in the same ways that guys can have the power fantasy of being a space marine, sisters kind of give that for women. One of my favourite models, just because I'm now looking through the 3rd edition Witch Hunters, and one of the models I bought recently was the old Hospitaller model.
Yes.
Okay.
And I think that kind of shows what you're meaning. So the description is, I'll ignore the stuff about the torturers, because the chirurgeon could be a torturer, an excoriator, or a sister Hospitaller. Although the purpose of a sister of the Order Hospitaller is very different to that of a torturer, their knowledge of the human body and their skills in the healing arts are no less thorough. Many an inquisitor or soldier has cause to thank the Emperor for their ministrations and heal their most grievous of wounds. I just quite like that as a description.
Yeah.
And there is another one. It might be in one of the role play books that the discussing the Sister Hospitallers. They will run out into a battlefield to rescue a single Imperial Guardsman because it is a warrior of the Emperor. But
They are
if you're
compassionate.
but if you are a heretic, dear God, those women know how to cause damage,
Yes.
and they will keep you alive until you are no longer useful.
See, that's the thing with the sisters is they're just a very cool army, and I think they are somewhat unique in 40k. And as far as they are all female, but that's not what is defining their abilities on the battlefield.
Yeah.
They are very competent fighters. They are incredibly good at holding the line and doing what they do, and they just happen to be all women.
Oh, yeah. To be perfectly honest, I would honestly prefer that the fact they're all ladies doesn't come up. To be honest, because it's not. There's a lore reason for them all being female, and that's all you really need.
Yeah, I do like that as the reason
just
they
do
are.
that. It's done. This is a female army. There are plenty of all male army, or indeed genderless armies in the case of demons. So why not?
Yeah.
Like that, there is no issue here. And if someone pretends that there is, they're a dick and should be ignored. That's simple.
Yeah. But
Um,
I think New Sisters overall, I was quite tempted to pick up the box set. I didn't quite manage it, but I'm fairly sure the sculpts will be available in the Sisters Start collecting when that eventually drops. So I'm not too bothered about that.
I expect we'll see a lot. I mean, the stuff they've revealed for coming out in January, which is when the main release is happening, looks so goddamn cool. Like weapons options, multi-part plastic cannoness who you can build with lots of different options.
There's only one way to build her, and that's the torch and the Condemno crossbow with the robe partly over her face. That is clearly the coolest option, and anyone else is wrong.
I'm with you there. The Condemnor bolt gun was one of the weapons that drew me into the Witch Hunters because it's there on the front cover of that codex with this pasty-faced motherfucker of an Inquisitor aiming it at a guy who's being roasted by an Inferno pistol.
yeah, I've got to admit, when I first read the Ordo Hereticus Codex, the thing that leapt out was not the fact that they were sisters. It wasn't the faith. It was the sheer fondness for burning things.
Yes. I must admit, the pyromaniac in me is
Right.
drawn to...
They had a lot of flame templates. Like, a lot of flame templates.
The Immolator?
Immolator, the tank, yes. The sisters had the Immolator, which was
There we
two
go.
heavy
Even
flamers
better. Yes.
mounted on top of a rhino.
That's
And
the one.
the new rules for the Immolator are scary because that heavy flamer is not just a heavy flamer. It's got one better strength and one better AP on it than a standard heavy flamer, and it just drives around the board doing drive-by cookings.
And just hosing things down with raw promethium. Hooray!
Yes.
So, just reading through the Sisters book, I forgot the Sisters, the Witch Hunters. It's a really good codex. It's solid. Especially the adversaries section.
Yes.
I forgot they did that. And the narratives.
Now that's something that is missing from more modern 40k is the narrative hooks that the older codices gave. Like, oh dear, the head of that Imperial Guard regiment has been practicing chaos worship or is a secret mutant.
So these two sections, I'll briefly explain them. You've got the Witch Hunter adversaries. Basically, if you're playing against Sisters and you've got some points spare, you can take a Rogue Cider. Road Cider? Clearly
Road
that's...
Cider?
Road Cider? I could do with a drink. A Rogue Psyker or an Apostate Cardinal, Mutants or Traitors. And there's a whole series of narrative hooks. So there's like generic ones, which was... The first one is the enemy general, demagogue, warlord, brainbug is practicing witchcraft.
Yes.
Nice basic reason.
That is the only reason you need. But go on.
So they also have why would the Space Marines and Witch Hunters fight? Why would the Tyranids, Chaos, don't think they need a reason. I've also got the Demon Hunters book here as well, and their reason for fighting chaos is better. It's their chaos. What more reason do you need?
Yes.
Why would witch hunters fight the Eldar? Because the entire Eldar race are deviant witches.
Well,
Yeah.
They're
there's
not
also
wrong.
the fact that that big old thing in the sky that used to be the Eye of Terror.
Yep.
That's kind of all the Eldars' fault.
It really
Yeah.
is.
Like, entirely the Eldar's fault.
And the
No
last
other race was responsible for it. Entirely the Eldar's fault.
They fucked a chaos god into existence.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm not going to say they fucked a chaos god into existence.
No, you're right. You're right. They didn't. They murder fucked.
They
the
murder
Chaos
fucked.
God into
Is the correct terminology.
Yes.
So there's also why would the Inquisition, why would the witch hunters fight the Imperial Guard? A decadent, free-thinking cult has infiltrated the army, and its heretical teachings are spreading like wildfire through the ranks. And there's probably between 2 and 6 different plot hooks for all of the armies that are in the game.
Why you could, yeah.
And that's just it. 2 bits, and I know I can't. I've somewhere I've got the witch hunters, the demon hunters nearby, but that's also similar. Like you can have your commander possessed by a demon.
Well, I remember with
Yes.
with the Demon Hunters Codex, the Grey Knights, wasn't it when you were facing demons, they got the without number rule
They did.
for free because you had so many advantages against them.
I found it.
Yeah.
I found it.
God. He's found it. He's found it. Okay.
I've dropped it. I've dropped it.
Shit. It's all gone wrong.
It's all right. I'm fairly sure this has had far worse than just been dropped on the floor over the
The
years.
killer fields have collapsed. Demons are
Right,
pouring
so
in.
you are referring to the demonic infestation. The presence
Yes.
of Grey Knights indicates intense demonic activity and an imminent breach of catastrophic proportion. To represent this, demon packs, nurgling, and demonic beasts, but not greater demons, demon princes, or any other type of demon, gain the sustained attack in a mission where they are opposed by Grey Knights. Demons brought back into play in this manner are not summoned. They re-enter the table from the edge as detailed in the sustained attack rules and cannot claim mission objectives.
Basically, all of the little fuckers would come back in full force.
Yeah.
So yeah, okay, to be fair, 2 very solid little codexes, because again, that has literally, I got the quote from Chaos correct. They're Chaos. What more reason do you need? Question mark. Yeah, there's lots of really cool little bits in this codex.
Well, there's lots of if you look at the that's right. Honestly, if you look at the older 40k codexes, the floppy ones,
Certainly the
basically,
third
the floppy
edition.
ones before they were
thereabouts.
hardback.
Just a second.
Almost all the floppy ones.
Can you hear that?
Yeah. Well.
Oh no, it's doing a flap.
It's floppy.
Oh, excellent.
Quality
Yeah,
broadcasting there.
Basically, all of them have not necessarily in the rules bit, but all of them just sprinkled throughout have these little boxes of lore, essentially. Like the Dark Elder one had something from an Imperial Guardsman's point of view as a raid was happening, which was really cool. There's a Tyranid one where some Caladan jungle fighters get royally fucked over by a lictor.
I remember that one.
Yeah, I know, it's wonderful, isn't it? The really, really fucking creepy one was the old Necron one.
Yes.
You know, before they got fucked up. And like because old Necrons were, oh Jesus, lore-wise they were incredibly creepy.
So yeah, I look forward to hearing more about Sisters, and getting a chance to play against them will be really cool.
I will have a hopefully 1,500 point army ready for our next big meetup.
Nice.
Awesome. Are we finishing then?
I think we're about.
I think we've hit that point, yeah.
Cool stuff.
So, firstly, thank you very much for everyone joining me tonight and waxing lyrical about fantasy.
The pleasure as always.
Thank you very much for listening to the Astrocast. I've been Brad.
The Mataspore.
I've been Theff.
We are part of Tinker Tailor Soldier Sponge Productions. We've got a number of other really good podcasts to listen to if you want. I highly recommend The Hat of Many Things, which is hosted by Dr. Wilco and Mike. They do kind of a general pull stuff out of a hat and talk on a topic. The last one they did was the Three Kingdoms period in China. Really good podcast. And especially at the moment, if you're a bit confused about politics, listen to Unparliamentary Language. That is Rob and Tom going through current political events, and Rob is fantastic at talking politics.
Awesome
So
stuff.
really, really recommend that. If you would like to support us, there is a Patreon on the Tinker Tailor Soldier Sponge website that hopefully will go towards getting better gear and equipment and that kind of stuff. So there we go.
Say, it's certainly not coming to me.
Well, that's because I currently believe the Patreon is about £10 and entirely goes to Wilco to fund the website.
That's all right. I don't want any. It's fine.
So yeah, I will try and remember to plug that at the end of episodes. Thank you very much for everyone that, and good night.
Good night.